This is the E911 Talk Podcast, episode 94, for Monday, July 23rd, 2012.
Welcome to this edition of E911 Talk with your host, Mark Fletcher, product line manager for emergency services at Avaya. Now, here's Fletch.
As someone who is responsible for the vision, strategy, and direction for emergency services solutions at a company who's historically been a manufacturer, I have a natural tendency to focus on the hardware related to supporting emergency communications. However, with the growth of software as a service and its migration to centralized computing platforms, or the cloud, I find myself shifting my thoughts and directions to those being less focused on the hardware and more focused on the operational procedures. When you look at almost any emergency event, you'll find that the procedure that was put into place is really the key to the successful outcome of any disaster. If you plan and train for the worst case scenario, when the real thing comes around, you're prepared. In the past, you probably have heard me talk about use cases and user stories as tools that we use to develop a product and its feature set. What these do is allow the basic modeling of a situation where you can then step through and practice various responses, as well as the outcomes. It's only when we start taking things for granted or at seemingly face value, poor choices can be made, or even strategies become forgotten. A great example is the Avaya Notification Solution, or ANS. Now, these types of reverse 911 solutions have been increasingly popular over the past several years as communities, schools, and even corporations try to reach out to their community of users with information about an emergent event or condition. Now, this could be as simple as there's a 2-hour delay in school opening due to inclement weather today that's directed to an entire community, or a more focused outreach to a particular geographic area or neighborhood. There's a gas leak in your area. Mandatory evacuation is required for your safety. So when these systems were first developed and introduced more than 10 years ago, I can remember speaking with a customer from a large university in the Southeast who was determined to install one of these systems. Now, in talking with them to define their requirements, they decided that they needed to notify 13,000 people, and they'd like to do that with a 30-second message, and their requirement was to have that completed within 15 minutes. Now, there's an old saying that says, you can't put 20 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. Well, maybe it wasn't sugar, but I think you get the point, and it really doesn't change things. For all my old, or experienced telecom folks, you'll remember Erlang tables were commonly used for traffic engineering, and the math for this problem goes something like this. 30 seconds for the actual message delivery, and we need to add to that 18 seconds for call setup and ringing. Remember, ringing cycle is about 6 seconds, and users will answer after about 2.5 rings. That gives us 48 seconds that has to be repeated 13,000 times. That equals 624,000 seconds of trunk use. Now, each individual trunk will provide 900 seconds of use in 15 minutes. That equates out to 694 trunks to accomplish that task. That equates over to 30 PRI T1s. And if you wanted to do it on regular T1s, you'll get to use all 24 channels, but you're going to add another 6 to 8 seconds of call setup time because it's got to outpulse the digits dialed. That's going to add up to another 100,000 seconds, bringing your total number of circuits required up to 34. So you can see the use case of notifying 13,000 people within 15 minutes via telephone is a challenging proposition. But as of October of last year, CTIA reported that there are 327.6 million mobile devices in use, which is more than the 315 million people that live in the U.S., Puerto Rico, and in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Additionally, earlier this year, Time Techland reported that 46% of Americans have a smartphone. Now, what's the important of all this? It's that the use case for the Avaya notification solution was to make a phone call to 13,000 people. The new use case is that a significant less number of people have to be, quote, called, unquote, as more and more subscribers can be reached by SMS, text, email, minimizing the trunking requirements significantly. So where a solution might not have made sense in the past, as outside factors have changed, new use cases became more applicable. The moral of this story is that you can plan for any disaster, and if you plan for the worst case disaster, you'll be more than ready when the one that is less impactful actually happens. Every year prior to the hurricane season, FEMA promotes their www.ready.gov initiatives. And September is officially the National Preparedness Month. What I'm asking you to do is take the time to get prepared in your home, your place of work, and your schools before a disaster happens or before the emergency hits. And remember, make sure your use cases are updated, and worst case use cases will let you prepare and assess your level of preparedness.
You've been listening to the E911 Talk podcast with your host, Mark Fletcher, product line manager for emergency services at Avaya. E911 Talk is a weekly podcast available on sites like this, as well as iTunes, and is available free of charge. If you have any comments or questions, you can email Fletch at fletcherm@avaya.com. That's Fletcher, the letter M, at avaya.com. Be sure to listen in next week for more informative topics on E911.
911, the line is recorded. What is the exact location of your emergency?